Wednesday. It's midweek, and here in Toronto, I mean, I know people are watching or listening to this podcast all over North America. Oh, hell, around the world.
I saw somebody watched it from Germany the other day, Bob. Somebody watched it from Germany the other day. So,
well, I guess things are pretty boring in Germany, but we got some snow on the ground here, and it's still coming down a little bit. And we are in metropolitan Toronto. Our good friend and long time no talk, needs no introduction. Bob McKenzie from TSN is with us, but he's up at the cottage, and you've got McKenzie. You got snow up there too?
Yes, sir. Not a lot, but enough. Any snow's too much for me. As we all know, as we get to our age in life, I don't know about you, but when I see that snow, I'm like, oh, come on, give me a break.
I tell you, there's a senior's moment. 3 guys talking about the weather. Unbelievable.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
exactly.
Oh, we got nothing else.
And people in Canada, people in Canada get pissed off too when you complain about the snow. They're like, yeah, come on, we're Canadians. That's what it's supposed to do in the winter. And I'm like, okay, fine, but I still don't want to clean the car off.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while since you and I have had a chance to chat due to circumstances. I was going to say beyond our control, but probably they were under our control. But McKenzie, of course, used to be a regular contributor to Primetime Sports, and then even when he was when he first went over to TSN from the Hockey News on kind of a full-time basis, it wasn't, I guess, until Rogers took over the Fan and put us on TV that we got into some problems. But it's nice to be able to chat with you again after. I don't even know how many years. Do you?
It's been many years, but it's great to catch up. I've been watching from afar, watching the travails of Bob McCown and all that goes on. Your wine enterprise, the employment situation, but yet here we are.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the book. We want to talk about the World Juniors and some other hockey stuff, of course, but. Now, this is volume 2 of a book that came out,
Correct.
What, a couple of years ago?
A couple of years ago, yeah. Everyday Hockey Heroes volume 1 came out 2 years ago, and this is volume 2. Surprise, surprise. But, and there might be a volume 3 for all we know. And actually, when Simon & Schuster first came to me with the idea, which would have been about 3 years ago in November, they said, listen, we think, if this goes as well as we think it's going to go, this could be something we do every other year after that. So we'll do a volume, we'll come out with a paperback a year later, and then come out with a new volume 2 years after that. So we'll see if that's the case, but it's been on some of the bestseller lists, so far so good.
Congratulations.
Between you and Duthie and Burke, the 3 of you seem to be cornering. Oh, I should mention Kiprios too, because I don't want the phone call. Your guys are cornering the book market.
James's book is doing really well. So is Berkey's. They've actually been out a little longer than our book has, but they've been ahead of us on the bestsellers list. And James reminds me of that pretty much every day. And I haven't spoken to Berkey lately, but if I did, he would remind me of that as well.
There's no question about that, But
Exactly.
Here's the thing with Brian, Bob. Here's the thing with Brian's book. You've heard every story already.
Exactly, and
your stories are new.
I got some of the true ones too.
So, having gone through the process of writing a book, although it's been a while, I had a co-author. You have a co-author in this, and I think everybody probably has a different process of doing this. How did it work with you and Lang?
Well, full disclosure, and I always tell people this, like Lang does way more work on the book than I do, and does a very good job. So here's my book writing history. 2008 or so, I wrote Hockey Dad, True Confessions of a Crazy Hockey Parent. And I loved writing that book. It was a real labor of love. I always felt like that was the book I had in me that I wanted out, about raising 2 boys in the minor hockey system in Canada and all the goofy, stupid ass things I did as a hockey dad. So I really enjoyed writing that book. It was fun and it was easy to do because, I didn't have to interview anybody. I didn't have to research anything. I just kind of had to go back and track the years my kids played this and make sure the stories were in chronological order. So that was a wonderful experience. Then 2012, we needed a new kitchen at the cottage, and I got an offer to do a book, and that was Hockey Confidential. So trust me, if writing a book isn't a labor of love for you, it's just labor. And so I needed the new kitchen, and I love the finished product, and I'm really, really, really proud of the book Hockey Confidential that I did. But that book almost killed me. Like, it physically took a toll with all my job and everything else going on, how busy I was. And I said afterwards, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm never writing another book. It's labor intensive. It's really hard. And even though it more than paid for the kitchen, I was looking at it afterwards on the hourly rate, and I'm like, I don't know if this makes a lot of sense to do this. So as happy as you are with the finished product. So my book, I got a book agent, and he kept on coming to me with this idea and that idea. And I said, no, I'm not doing any more books. I'm not doing any more books. So then 3 years ago, November, Kevin Hansen and Sarah St. Pierre from Simon & Schuster come to me, and they say, hey, we've got an idea. So they pitched me the idea. And I got to be honest, cynically, the first thing that appealed to me was that Jim Lang was going to do most of the work. I would write an introduction. I would write a chapter, and the chapters are long. Like, my one chapter in this volume is almost 10,000 words, which for some people is close to a book. But I had huge input into the editorial direction in terms of the people that we interview, the people that we tell stories about. I love working with Jim and Sarah. And so, and quite frankly, to put the cynic in me aside, when they pitched me the idea of everyday hockey heroes, famous and not so famous people who have inspiring stories on and off the ice, a lot of the stories really moved me. I was really inspired by a lot of them, and people I'd never heard of before. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's just a great story. And I can see what they're trying to do with this book, and it's going to be a fun book to be. And honestly, all joking aside, it's actually been a game changer for me personally in terms of the way I view hockey, the way I view hockey culture, the way I view people, and just our society at large.
Isn't that the magic of, I think, Bob, guys that have earned their living in and around the game for so long, isn't that the magic of the game? Because it's the people that make this, profession so fun, successful, and passionate. It's because it's, I mean, how many times can we do a CBA discussion? How many times can we talk about a power play? How many times can we talk about, escrow? But, you're around the game because of all the people you love. And yeah. I know I can speak personally. I'm around the game because, gosh, these are all my friends and the people you meet in even in your local arena. That's what makes it so much fun.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about that. And great stories are great stories. That's first and foremost. And there's so many great stories within hockey. And as you point out, John, there's so many great people within hockey. Now, all that said, one of the things that struck me since I've been involved with this book is there's great people and there's great stories. And it is a wonderful society, if you want to call it that. But it's also at times a closed culture. It's also at times where it is too insular, where because we've all been all the three of us have been in it for so long, that you kind of wrap yourself around all the same sort of people. And what you realize is, as good a game as it is, as good as the people that are involved in the game are, you get to a point where, and we use this term hockey culture, and it used to be a really positive thing. Hockey culture was a great thing. Hockey culture's got a negative connotation now, and understandably so in many instances, because even though it's a great game and there's so many great people, there are a whole bunch of people who, like you and me, we all love the game of hockey, and that's a common denominator. Every single person in this book, the common denominator is unbelievable passion and love for the game of hockey. So that's the starting point. But then what you find out is, because it's a woman, because it's the person's Black, because the person's transgender, because the person's gay, because the person's different in some way, their experience with the great people and the wonderful society of hockey hasn't been nearly as positive as yours and mine, because they start on the margins and they're trying to get into the center with the rest of us, and there are people in the center that are pushing them out and saying, no, you're not part of this group. And so in some instances, the best stories are the ones where these people got pushed away, pushed back, and got themselves to the center of it, and they're happy in a better place because of it.
Okay, so that's a really good point, and I 100% agree with you. So as somebody who's a leader in the industry, and you are, how do we open the doors better to these people? How do we do it?
I think we just need to have a greater sense of self-awareness and to realize that we are fortunate that we, you know, the other term that triggers some people now is white privilege. And so I think you've got to come to terms, especially those of us who are elderly white males. Sorry, guys.
How's the weather? How's the weather?
Yeah, speak for yourself.
Yeah, just because Bobcat's hair is still dark, but us elderly white males have got to understand that we do have white privilege, and white privilege should never be confused with a privileged life, because I don't feel like when I grew up as a kid I had a privileged life. I had a blue collar family. My mom had rheumatoid arthritis. It was horrendous what she went through. Her life was a living hell. She ended up in a wheelchair for 16, 17 years. She died in her 50s because of complications from rheumatoid arthritis. My dad worked morning, noon, and night from 8 in the morning till 10 at night, and had to be a caregiver for much of his life. And I could go up and down the line of why I did not lead a privileged life in the blue collar growing up in Scarborough in the 1960s. But in terms of me wanting to be in the mainstream hockey media and be successful, the same as you, Bobcat, in radio and TV, and Johnny, you in television, and that we had no obstacles in our way. There was nobody who ever said, you can't do that because you're black, or you can't do that because you're gay, or you can't do that because you're transgender. So I think what we in hockey culture need to do is just be aware that as much as we love the game, there are other people who love it just as much as us, but they don't get received as warmly by the hockey culture because they are different. And so then it's up to you to try and do one tangible thing to try and make those people feel more welcome. And for me, that's be part of this book and spread the word that we all need to do a better job.
With Bob McKenzie, my experience is slightly different. When I started having kids and my son started to play hockey, I was always a hockey fan. Hockey, well, for anybody growing up in Canada, this was the game. You may like other sports, but hockey was part of your core. And he got involved he wasn't highly competitive, but I started experiencing parents, fathers most specifically, who were yelling and screaming and calling out obscenities and doing all the things that we don't want hockey parents to do. And I have to confess, Mackenzie, that turned me off the game to a great extent. And I probably have to admit that I've had a very difficult time getting back to my roots of loving the game. It's always been tempered. Did you go through that at all?
Yes and no. And, you know, and when you're talking to a guy who wrote a book about being a crazy hockey dad, you know, mea culpa on some things. But
sure.
But there is no doubt. I would go back and forth. I was like every other parent that you could get swept up in it at times, but I always like to think, and if you know, when I read the book now and look back on it, you know, I think I understood the difference of, you know, when the lines were crossed, and I didn't cross any lines horrendously, but nevertheless, there's a lot of things that used to bother me, the same thing as you. But I think, you know, and that's not just unique to hockey. That's life. I mean,
no, I agree.
There's just so many. You take any segment of the population, and there's going to be an element of it that people go crazy and they act stupid, and it does turn you off, and it does bother you. And so, yeah, there were lots of times I'd be at a rink and I'd just be looking around at the way people were behaving, and I'd be like, this is insane. Like, come on, people, give your head a shake, and they're kids. And to your point, and that's the other point, when you talked about viewing things through the prism of being a parent, or in this case, a hockey parent, and to what Johnny talked about a few minutes ago about what can we all do to make hockey culture better. I find a really good thing is to, anytime you're looking at any situation in the game, just any individual in the game and what's going on, just pretend that person is your kid and think about it for a second and say, okay, what if this story was about my kid? And I did that throughout the book, where what if my kid was Jessica Platt, who's transgender? What if my kid was Joey Gale, who's gay? What if my kid was Rob Thackett's son, Louis, who was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy? You know, what if, you know, and that's because I think we all like to think we're really good parents, or we try to be. And there's nothing more important than being a parent, and nothing hits you in the heart more than when your kids are going through a good time or a bad time. You feel it with them, and so it's a lot easier to be empathetic for what's going on in any given situation if you just pretend the person you're analyzing or studying is actually your kid, and what would you want for them, and that's the way to govern. That's the way to govern your behavior.
Just before we talk about the World Juniors and what's going on in the pros, I must say though, our sons are around the same age, and my son Jake loved playing the game, but when he stopped playing, I think I missed it more than he did. I really do. I think I missed going to the rink and seeing those people, and for all the years that I have been in the pro business. There was nothing like going to the local arena, having a coffee, sitting and watching your kid play the game. There was a warmth to it. There was a magic to it. And it's something as a parent, I think you really do miss. You really do miss it when it happens.
You know what intrigues me, guys? I'm going to guess this for you, John, that, you know, this was long before you became a publicly recognizable figure. You were working in hockey, but you were behind the scenes. It was a time when I was on radio, but I didn't get recognized very often. Mackenzie, what was it like for you? Was this hockey news time when you were going to your kids' rinks, or were you by that time at TSN? And did you get recognized?
Yeah, I was already on television my son Mike was born in 86. My son Sean was born in 89. I started doing TSN work around 86, 87, 88, 89.
That's that hockey news show. That's that hockey news show that Paul Graham invented for you.
That's right, exactly. So, but so yeah, the kids grew up as, those are Bob McKenzie's kids, and that presented a unique set of challenges, but also a lot of rewards too. And so yeah, but that most of the time people were pretty good. But if I'll send if I have any copies left of the Hockey Dad book, Bobcat, I'll send it to you, because there are a lot of pretty funny stories about stuff where because I was well known, that things either went particularly horrible or particularly well in the rinks. But to your point, John, I agree with you. Like, on balance, when I look back at my kid's minor hockey career, it was the best of times, and there were some worst of times there, because I had one son who had really bad concussion issues and had to quit the game of hockey at age 14, and those were dark times for our family to go through, and that gave me a unique perspective on what it's like for these people that have concussions and traumatic brain injuries, nothing to be trifled with, but I also felt like when it was over, and I was fortunate enough with my son Mike, he played 4 years of college hockey, NCAA at St. Lawrence University. He played 2 years in the American League and the East Coast League, went to 2 NHL training camps with the Carolina Hurricanes. He packed it in. He'd gone as far as he was going to go, and didn't want to hang around the minors too long. And when he initially quit, I was like, oh man, you're right. I had this huge void in my life. But it didn't take me very long to think, you know what, there's a natural evolution to being a hockey parent. And the normal thing is for it to be over. And yeah, there's sadness when it's over, but what am I going to do with all this free time? And suddenly it was like, I was like, this is awesome. And so we never had a cottage when I grew up, when the kids grew up, because they played lacrosse in the summer, hockey in the winter. We had no time for cottage. And as soon as Sean stopped playing and Mike was done, we got a cottage. And all of a sudden I was like, what have I been missing all these years? It was awesome.
Well, you had time to write a book. You had time to write a book then.
Yeah, so. One door closes, another one opens up.
Well, I tell you, the other thing is, from that perspective, one of my goals for my son was to love the game for the rest of his life. Yeah. And I'll tell you right now, he's a goalie, so he plays more now than he ever did as a minor hockey player. And that to me, that's the satisfying part about being part of the game. Let's get to the World Juniors.
Yeah.
You're going to Edmonton in about 10 days. Hopefully everything is a hunky dory and the COVID testing is working and all the teams are there. So what do you expect out of this tournament?
Well, you know what, John, I think it's I don't even want to look ahead to the tournament yet. I will in a second, but I'm almost holding my breath and saying, okay, I can't look too much ahead to the first games on December 25th, or in the case of Canada, December 26th, because we got to get these 10 teams from all over the world to Edmonton on Sunday. Sunday's the check-in day for going into a 4-day quarantine period that's followed then by being released into the bubble. And as everybody probably knows by now, the Swedes have had multiple positive tests this week in their camp. They've lost a number of players, including their head coach. The Germans lost a couple of players. The Americans lost a few players, 2 players for Canada. 5 altogether were deemed unfit to play and sent home from the camp in Red Deer yesterday. So we got to get to Sunday. And right now, Alberta Health and the federal government have conditionally signed off on all the protocols that would allow the World Juniors to take place with Hockey Canada and the IIHF. And so everybody's intent on trying to make that happen. But I mean, you'd be stupid not to look at the numbers skyrocketing in Alberta. The healthcare system under extreme pressure in Alberta, and everything else that's going on with all these teams from all over the world and what have you. So I'm just taking it one day at a time. And the first phase is to get to Sunday and these 10 teams in, get through the quarantine period. And once they get released into the bubble, I think everybody's got a lot of confidence that this thing will probably go off without a hitch. But it's getting to that phase of December 18th or 19th before you can breathe easy and say, well, the tournament's going to be on. But all things being equal, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the tournament. It's kind of a little bit of a dream team tournament to the extent that some players who otherwise wouldn't be available because they'd be in the NHL are here. Now, Alexis Lafreniere is not there for Canada, but Kirby Dach is. Kirby Dach played last year for the Chicago Blackhawks, 64 games, and played extremely well this past summer for the Hawks in the bubble Stanley Cup playoffs. And he's on Team Canada, and that normally wouldn't happen. So Canada's got a really good team, but so do a lot of the other countries. But until we see who's healthy, who's not, and what the rosters look like, it's a tough tournament to handicap.
Well, you have been, I mean, obviously this is one of TSN's biggest annual events, and justifiably so, and you've been involved with it virtually since day one. And one of the things I know that you are asked to do is handicap this tournament, predict things. We all in our position are kind of compelled to do that. And I'm wondering how difficult it has been for you to really analyze and project what's going to happen in this tournament, given the environment, McKenzie, that we are all living in, and the fact that we haven't seen juniors play hockey since March.
Yeah, it's crazy. So just as an example, the goaltenders for Team Canada, they got 5 in camp right now. Yeah. And none of them have played a meaningful game of hockey since last March. And they're going to get whoever they end up picking to be on the team, they're going to get one exhibition game against the Swedes and one exhibition game against the Russians before the tournament begins. And that's it. So imagine a goaltender going 9 months having played only 2 or 3 games and not really getting a lot of practice time either, to be honest. So the handicapping of how to pick the team and how good the teams are, and even at the best of time, Bobcat, this tournament, I'm always asked to handicap it, and I go, hey, this is a 2-week tournament where the teams have each team has never played together in the past and will never play together in the future. So how do you make sense of that? And so you look at it, and how many first-round NHL picks do they have? How many 19-year-olds do they have? How many returning players do they have? And you kind of look at those 3 things for the various teams and say, if you come up with a bit of a formula, who's got the most first-rounders, who's got the most 19-year-olds, and who's got the most returning players? If one team has the most in all 3 of those categories, there's your favorite. But that's an inexact science, and I haven't even done that exercise yet, by the way.
But the other part of it is from the early days of you guys doing the tournament, there's a heck of a lot more information about some of those European teams that at one point you didn't know, like the Russians.
Yeah,
like the Russians. I mean, I've been involved a little longer on the other side, on the pro side, but there were teams that came over to play tournaments and play in exhibition series here. We had no clue who half the guys were, and I'm sure the same thing was true for the 18-year-olds.
Yeah, for sure. And but Bob, you're right. I love this tournament. It's been great, and it's been great for TSN. They've had it since 1991, and I've done every one of those tournaments since 91, except for 92 in Fusen, Germany. Myself and Gord Miller, we got assigned to cover pre-Olympic hockey in Red Deer in Calgary that year instead of going to the World Juniors. That's the only one I've missed. But the Johnny will get a kick out of this. I actually did the last tournament, the last World Junior tournament that the CBC did. The play-by-play man was Don Whitman. The color commentator was Scotty Bowman. The host was Brian Williams, and this MOOC was the analyst.
And where was that one? Where was that one, Bob?
That was in Helsinki and Turku. That was Eric Lindros's first World Junior as a 16-year-old. So, and even before that, I went to the Anchorage, Alaska game, World Juniors in '89. Saw Bure, Bielny, and Fedorov play as a line. I was at the '86 tournament in Hamilton, the Copps Coliseum. That was terrific. So I've always had a huge affinity for this tournament, and it's been good for TSN. It's been good for my career and for hockey fans across Canada. Fingers crossed, as long as it can be done safely. I think we all need a little normalcy in our lives, and what's more normal than waking up around Christmas, Boxing Day, and New Year's with World Junior hockey to watch.
So again, Williams, Whitman, and Bowman were on that CBC broadcast. Is that right?
Yeah. You do the Sesame Street thing. One of these things doesn't belong with the other.
No, I've never heard of any of them. So anyway, here's the intriguing thing for me in trying to look ahead. So, we're not used to this COVID thing. We're never going to get used to it. But we have seen some things happen that have been unusual in many ways. We have a Stanley Cup champion was crowned, and it was Tampa Bay. No big surprise. We have had an NBA champion crowned. It was the LA Lakers.
The Lakers.
No big surprise. We've had a World Series champion crowned, the LA Dodgers. No big surprise. And yet I'm surprised in looking back at that what has evolved has been as normal and as expected as it has been. Do you think that necessarily applies here to the World Juniors?
Probably. I think it'll be the same thing again. But the funny thing with the World Juniors is Canada or the US or Russia or Sweden or Finland could win the gold medal any year they have the tournament.
Yeah, I agree.
Those 5 hockey powers, any one of those 5 teams could win the tournament. The question becomes, could somebody other than those 5 teams steal a medal from one of those 5 teams? And that's really where the upset comes in. So, I can't imagine there's a team other than one of those 5 hockey powers that's going to win the gold medal. And COVID be damned, whatever. It's just, as you say, at the end of the day, whether the pandemic's on or off, as you say, the good teams still find a way to win.
But you bring up a really good point, Bob, about when they host the tournament. And here we are. Canada's going to host the tournament, but there aren't going to be 19,000 people singing "Oh Canada" twice a night and flags waving every time. The NFL, the visiting team, has won more games now this year than any other time before. I'm not sure there is home ice advantage anymore in this tournament.
There's not, and here's the thing about the pandemic and how quickly things change. So a couple of weeks ago, conventional wisdom was that Canada and the United States are at a severe disadvantage because most of the European players and teams have been playing in Europe. And they started a lot of these leagues. Sweden's been playing since October. And so, the Swedes and the KHL has been going great guns and lots of COVID outbreaks, but they just plow ahead and away they go. So teams like Sweden and Russia have been playing, those kids have been playing hockey all season long. Most of the Canadian kids are not playing at all. Most of the American kids are not playing at all. So huge disadvantage. And then all of a sudden on Monday, the Swedes gather for their camp and suddenly 4 or 5 of their top players have tested positive for COVID and they're out of the tournament. Oh, wait a second here. Maybe suddenly playing hockey in October and November isn't such an advantage if you end up getting COVID and now you can't even participate in the tournament. And suddenly Canada, who's been in quarantine for 14 days and not very happy about it because these young kids that want to play hockey and are there in Red Deer, and they'd be literally locked in their hotel rooms for 14 days with windows that can't open and going crazy. Suddenly they're like, ooh, that turned out to be a pretty good thing for us. Maybe we're going to have a better chance maybe now of winning this tournament because maybe all of our best players are going to be healthy versus some of the other teams. So it's, pandemic hockey is crazy, but you just kind of take it a day at a time.
Another thing that occurs to me here, just sitting and chatting with you two guys, is you'll recall it wasn't all that many years ago that one of the annual topics of conversation when it came to the World Junior or even the World Championships was the size of the ice surface and the impact that was going to have on the event. Would it be more of a disadvantage to Canadian teams playing on the bigger ice or more of a disadvantage to the European teams, in the case of the World Juniors, coming to the North and playing the North American ice? That conversation, McKenzie, seems to have dissipated. We don't really talk about that much anymore.
Especially when it's Europeans playing on North American ice. I believe, for the most part, Europeans playing on North American ice have adapted much better than Canadians or Americans playing on international ice, where I still think there are examples to the contrary, and Mike Babcock coached teams at the Olympics would be the exception to the rule. But I still think when a Canadian team goes on to the 100 by 200 foot international sheet, that there are still difficulties for a lot of players in adapting. Whereas I think most of the Russians and Swedes and Finns and Czechs and all the other European nations have fully adapted to playing on and done a much better job of playing on the smaller ice. And the funny thing is, for the longest time, back when we had hockey summits, what's wrong with the Canadian game? And people would say, well, one of the problems is the North American ice is too small. You got to open it up international size. So in the 80s and 90s, people were saying, you got to make the rinks in North America 100 by 200. And then now the International Ice Hockey Federation has actually mandated that the new official size for international ice is not 100 by 200, but smaller. There's a hybrid version that's used a lot in Finland that's 92 by 200. And they split the difference between the 85 by 200 and the 100 by 200, right. And they come up 92 or 93. And that's what most international hockey is aiming to go for. And there's actually a movement within international hockey to maybe even go to 85 by 200. So everything's gone 180 degrees in like 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. I actually think that there's a higher skill level required to play the game on the smaller rink. I think it's a higher skill level. I mean, absolutely. so if we're trying to improve skill, why would we try to make it bigger? Guys, and when you go to 200 by 100, you put the importance of the game in the pockets, in the hands of the coaches again, because now it becomes a chess game. Now it becomes a tactical game, and it's not near as fun to watch.
And because we're three old farts talking about stuff, think about where the NHL's even gone. The NHL used to have the Chicago Stadium, Memorial Auditorium, Boston Garden, all these weird rinks that were like Fenway Park or Wrigley Field that had unique characteristics in terms of the angles on the corners, how how much smaller they were than even 85 by 200, and so in a manner of speaking, when you were in the 60s and 70s with those old bandboxes, it required even greater skill and ability to navigate in those unique circumstances. Whereas now, you lose a lot of home ice advantage in the NHL now because every rink's basically the same, 85 by 200 and 20,000 seats. There's no unique qualities to the rink.
Put the Montreal Forum in that list too, Bob. A lot of people, they wouldn't tell you, but the Forum, I mean, if you put a tape measure to the Forum, you wouldn't get all the way to the end before you realized you were finished. So that was one of the advantages that many people, Mr. Pollock, Mr. Bowman, even people before them, Frank Selke Sr., that was the advantage they had in Montreal. Speaking of the NHL, I know you're not as plugged in, even though you're more plugged in than anybody.
I'm the outsider now.
Oh yeah, Bull.
Yeah, sure.
January 13th.
Well, that's what everybody tells me. I still want to. I want to see the. Listen, I don't think it's any secret that there are a bunch of NHL owners, and I don't know exactly how many because I haven't spoken to them and what have you. And as I say, I'm a little bit removed from that day-to-day stuff now. But I think there are a bunch of NHL owners that are not happy about going back and playing without fans and the expense of going back and playing. And there are some owners who would rather not play, although I don't think that's realistically an option. And I think Gary Bettman's probably made that point to the owners, saying, yeah, it might sound good in theory or on a balance sheet to say we'd lose less money by not opening the doors. But if the NBA is playing and Major League Baseball is playing and the NFL is playing, and the NHL's not, you can't you can't just opt out and shutter up the doors and say we'll come back at you next year when the vaccine's around, and until then have a good time. So but I am curious to see, Gary Bettman never holds a vote with the Board of Governors unless he knows that he's got all the votes necessary. That's always been his trademark. This is one time when I'm just a little curious to see what the vote might be for coming back, because I know the players have said we're not going to mess around with the financial terms and conditions of the MOU or the CBA that we just negotiated, and I think there are some owners that are like, well, I don't think we want to play right now then, but I think we will play. It'll probably be January 13th, but I always allow in these situations where it could be closer to the end of January as well.
Well, I mean, and you bring up a really good point, because that part is it's the same thing as the World Junior. We have to get through the health crisis a little bit further before we decide whether we're playing now. Yeah. The one thing I can tell you is yesterday he got a vote of confidence from that very small executive committee, and even the toughest of Hawks that said they didn't want to play Gay said, "Well, Gary, it's in your hands, and we trust you, and you're the guy to get this thing done." So.
Much as I have very much enjoyed this renewal of acquaintanceship with Mr. McKenzie after many years of not being able to chat with him for political reasons that are absurd, but nonetheless, we have things to do, McKenzie. I know it's not snowing that hard where you are, but John has to go out and shovel the driveway.
There's no snow where I live. There's no snow where I live.
And I have to go and supervise the people that I pay to shovel my driveway. So this all being the case, we'll wrap this thing up. We wish you good luck with the book, of course. Everyday Hockey Heroes, Volume 2. Is that what it's called exactly?
That's correct. More inspiring stories. Yes.
We wish you good luck with it. I don't think you need it. And I assume we will not have the opportunity to chat with you again before the holiday season. So we wish you and your family and all around you a happy holidays. And I know you'll enjoy the World Juniors. Stay safe, pal, will you?
Yeah, great to catch up with you guys. Absolutely. And thanks for having me on and allowing me to talk about the book and everything else. And like you, Bob, I'm waiting for the guy to come and plow the driveway since I live out here at the lake. And I don't have any. I have no snow to shovel, but I do have a little snow up here that needs to be cut. Yeah. My pre-World Junior haircut is today, so I'm off to get that trimmed.
And for the record, I'll be both of your houses to do the snow very quickly. Okay.
Yeah, hurry up.
You're on the schedule. You're on the schedule. So.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bob, thank you, pal. Bob McKenzie of TSN on the podcast today. We'll see you again on Friday. Bye-bye.